$200 a barrel. That number sounds impossible. It sounds like fear-mongering. It sounds like something that could never happen in a modern, sophisticated global economy. And yet, right now, at this very moment, the conditions that would send oil prices to levels never seen in human history are aligning with terrifying precision. The Gulf is on fire. Shipping lanes are under threat. Insurance companies are pulling coverage, and the strategic petroleum reserves that were supposed to protect the Western world from exactly this scenario, they're running dangerously low. But here's what nobody in the financial media is telling you clearly enough. This isn't just about oil. This isn't just about gasoline prices at the pump. This is about the entire foundation of modern civilization beginning to crack under pressure that most people don't even realize exists. Your groceries, your electricity, your retirement portfolio, your job. Everything you depend on to live a normal life in the modern world is connected to a single commodity that just became the most dangerous asset on the planet. Welcome to OG Silver, the channel where we decode the financial signals that Wall Street insiders understand but never explain to ordinary investors. If you've been paying attention to global markets, if you've been watching the chaos unfold in the Middle East, if you've been wondering why the so-called experts on television keep telling you everything is fine while the world burns around them, then you're in the right place. Now listen carefully. If you've been investing for more than a decade, you've seen oil shocks before. You remember 2008. You remember the Russia-Ukraine spike in 2022. You've watched prices surge and retreat. But what's happening right now? This is different. This is structural. And if you're not positioned correctly before this weekend's, the financial consequences could follow you for years. Hit that subscribe button because the information in this video could be worth more than anything you'll hear from mainstream financial media this month. And drop your country in the comments below. I want to know where in the world people are waking up to what's really happening. 3 weeks ago, oil markets were relatively calm. Prices hovered around $90 a barrel. Analysts were debating whether demand would soften. Traders were positioning for a quiet summer. The narrative from every major financial network was the same. Stability. Gradual movement. Nothing to worry about. And then the Gulf exploded. Iranian strikes on oil tankers. Retaliatory threats from Washington. Insurance companies withdrawing coverage from vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Shipping routes being rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope, adding weeks to delivery times and billions to transportation costs. In 72 hours, everything changed, and the markets still haven't priced in what comes next. But here's the question that nobody on CNBC, nobody on Bloomberg, nobody in the mainstream financial press is asking with the seriousness it deserves. What happens if the Strait of Hormuz actually closes? Not partially disrupted, not occasionally threatened, actually closed, even for a week. Because that scenario, the scenario that every energy analyst privately fears but publicly dismisses, is no longer theoretical. It is now a distinct operational possibility. And the number that emerges from that scenario is the number that should terrify every investor, every business owner, and every ordinary citizen watching this video. $200 a barrel, minimum. Have you ever wondered why the price you pay for gas can suddenly jump overnight? A lot of it has to do with something called an oil shock, and a tiny strip of water halfway across the world. Let's dive into the history of oil shocks and the surprising math behind our global energy addiction. Our story starts in 1973. In response to Western support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War, Arab oil-producing nations declared an embargo. They cut production and stopped exporting to the United States and its allies. The result? Chaos. Gas prices quadrupled. Long lines formed at gas stations, and economies around the world went into a tailspin. This was the first major oil shock, and it was a brutal wake-up call. It showed just how dependent the world had become on a handful of countries for its energy. But it wasn't the last. The Iranian Revolution in 1979 triggered the second oil shock. Panic buying on the global market, even with a relatively small drop in production, caused prices to more than double. Then came the Iran-Iraq War in the 80s, the Gulf War in 1990, and various other conflicts and political instabilities. Each event sent ripples and sometimes tidal waves through the global economy. Each time the world held its breath. So where does the math come in? It's all about a simple but terrifying equation of supply, demand, and geography. And the most critical variable in that equation is a place called the Strait of Hormuz. Picture a narrow waterway, only about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. The strait connects the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. Now, here's the staggering part. Roughly 1/5 of the entire world's daily oil consumption passes through this single choke point. That's about 21 million barrels of oil every single day. And let me repeat that. 20% of the planet's oil squeezes through a channel you could cross in a ferry in a little over an hour. This is the heart of global energy dependency. The countries bordering the strait, like Iran and Oman, hold immense strategic power. Any disruption, whether it's a political dispute, a military conflict, or even an accident, can instantly choke off a massive chunk of the world's energy supply. When this supply is threatened, the math gets scary. Even a small disruption can lead to panic on the financial markets. Traders start bidding up the price of the remaining available oil, anticipating future shortages. This is called a risk premium. Suddenly, the price of a barrel of oil isn't just about supply and demand, it's also about fear and uncertainty. That fear translates directly to higher prices at the pump, increased shipping costs for all the goods you buy, and a potential slowdown of the entire global economy. Think about it like this. Imagine all the trucks delivering food to your city had to pass over a single old bridge. If that bridge were to close for even a day, the panic would be immediate. Supermarket shelves would empty, and the price of whatever food was left would skyrocket. The Strait of Hormuz is that bridge for the world's economy. Over the decades, countries have tried to reduce this dependency. We've seen investments in strategic petroleum reserves, giant underground stockpiles of oil for emergencies. There's been a push for energy efficiency, developing cars that go further on a gallon of gas. And, of course, the race to develop alternative energy sources like solar, wind, and nuclear power is a direct response to the vulnerability exposed by these oil shocks. But the transition is slow. For now, the global economy still runs on oil, and that oil still flows through the Strait of Hormuz. The history of oil shocks isn't just a history lesson, it's a continuous, real-time calculation of risk that affects us all. The next time you see gas prices fluctuating, remember the fragile geography and complex math that connects your local gas station to that narrow strip of water on the other side of the world. Now examine the strategic calculation behind what is unfolding. Iran understands the mathematics of Hormuz better than anyone. Tehran knows that it cannot defeat the United States in a conventional military confrontation. No serious analyst in Iran believes otherwise. But Iran also knows something that changes the entire equation. It does not need to win a war to achieve its objectives. It needs only to raise the economic cost of confrontation to a level that makes continued pressure politically unsustainable. This is asymmetric economic warfare executed at the highest level. Every percentage point that oil climbs, every $1 billion erased from global equity markets, every European government that calls Washington and says their economy cannot survive another shock is a point scored for Tehran. Not on a battlefield, in a boardroom. The question is no longer whether Iran will use this leverage. The evidence of the past 72 hours answers that question definitively. The question now is how far they are willing to push before someone blinks. And this brings us to the dilemmas facing policymakers in Washington, London, Brussels, and every allied capital watching this crisis unfold. The options are limited, and each carries catastrophic risk. A direct military response against Iranian assets risks exactly the escalation that would close Hormuz entirely. The war game scenarios are clear. Once missiles start flying, tankers stop sailing. Insurance coverage disappears overnight. Oil hits 200 before Washington can hold a press conference. Diplomatic de-escalation risks signaling weakness at exactly the moment when adversaries are testing limits. Russia watches. China watches. Every nation currently calculating whether American security guarantees mean anything watches. Doing nothing risks the normalization of attacks on critical infrastructure. If this provocation goes unanswered, the next one is already being planned. There is no clean solution. There is no path forward that does not involve significant economic pain or significant geopolitical risk or both. Here is the final truth that every investor, every business owner, and every ordinary person watching this video must internalize before this week ends. The global economy runs on oil. That has been true for a century and remains true today, regardless of how many electric vehicles appear on the road or how many solar panels get installed on rooftops. When oil is abundant and stable, economies grow. When oil is scarce and chaotic, economies contract. When oil becomes a weapon, wielded deliberately by nations willing to absorb pain in order to inflict it, the consequences extend far beyond energy markets. $200 a barrel is not a prediction. It is a mathematical outcome of a scenario that is no longer hypothetical. The strait is under threat. The tankers are burning. The insurance markets are freezing. And the reserves that were supposed to protect us are depleted. The dominoes are falling. The only question that remains is whether you will be positioned correctly when the last one lands. This is OG Silver. The signals are there for anyone willing to see them.